I'm here today because I think we face a serious problem. A problem that keeps me up at night, but I'm not sure yet whether it keeps you awake. It's a problem of how our media companies are going to adapt to the digital disruption facing them. You see, I believe that vibrant, independent, diverse media is essential to democracy, and that without it, oppression will rise, corruption will grow, and our freedom will diminish. I don't think this is a problem for just media companies and their executives. I think it's your problem. It's a problem that you will have to bear the consequences of if you don't act. And so, for many years, I've been wondering, how can we fix this problem? What is the solution? And my thought is that the solution is with us. It is with us stepping up and putting ourselves at the centre of the circle, of starting a conversation with media companies about the kind of media that we want, that we need for today. You see, it's all very well to talk about adaptation and Charles Darwin, but that was adaptation over thousands of years. Media companies are facing change at a pace never seen before. They need solutions to complex problems that only you can provide. So today, I'm giving this talk with the hope that you will act. Before I ask you something of you, I want to tell you why I came to this idea, why I think maybe there's something in it. And it's my 37 years of thinking about and being passionate about participatory democracy and about the role that media plays in people's lives. I say 37 years not because I'm 37, I'm 42, but it started when I was 5. You see, my parents were hippies. They were professional, kind of earnest types who gave up their lives and bought a caravan and moved to North Coast, New South Wales in 1975. And it was there I saw with these, new age types sitting around growing their own food, the stuff that people talk about today as if it's a new idea, sustainable living. They sat around and they argued about the issues that mattered to them. They debated the facts. They fleshed things out. They gave their opinions. Diverse views were listened to and recognised. And even before I went to university to study economics and political science, I knew I'd already seen participatory democracy in action. And it was also at the commune called Homeland where I first had a taste of media. You see, there wasn't media in the town, in Bellingen, that met their needs. The local newspaper didn't cover the stories about the rainforest or the community centre, so they published their own magazine and sent it out across Australia, even over to other parts of the world. And in that magazine there were stories, there were poems, there was photographs. And I could see in that the need for diverse voices that we all need in a society. Even if we're one society, we need different perspectives, diverse media, not singularity. And another thing I learned about media was its resonance and power for people. I was 5 when my first poem was published in that magazine. My name was there alongside all the others. I was a person who mattered, not just a child. And I could see in that the need to put people into the media, how rich that is and how empowering that is. After that, I continued my obsession with media and democracy and political science and lots of things. And I edited the school newspaper. I started a literary magazine at Oxford called The Phoenix, which I think, by the way, is a great URL for anybody wanting to start a new media company, rising from the ashes. That joke obviously didn't work. And I even found a way to take my first job, or my first serious career. My first job was actually painting people's faces as a clown. That's another story. My first serious job as the CEO of an outdoor advertising company, I found a way to put poems and prose on bus shelters and trams all over Sydney and Melbourne just because I believed it was important for people to have a connection to place, even in the furniture on their street. But despite all that, no one was as surprised as I was when it turned out that my next career was as the CEO of a rather well-known commercial Sydney talk radio station. And people always ask me about that experience. They ask me, you know, how did you manage the personalities, the egos? There's certain names of people and gossip they'd like to hear about. But that's not what I learned. I didn't learn things about personalities. What I learned most of all were two things. I learned about the power of people to connect through their own stories. And I learned about the importance of people in media who put people first, and of collecting data, of collecting information straight from the people, not through a research company. So the callers, I remember, they're not ghosts. They're still alive to me. And I remember them all, like the woman who called up one day in her late 60s, telling her story. You see, she'd been forced to put her son into permanent care. Not that she wanted to. She'd been ably looking after him for 30 plus years. But she couldn't find a temporary spot for him. He was disabled. He was physically difficult, and she was feeling the strain mentally and physically. I remember her crying and explaining how humiliated and embarrassed and ashamed she was when they made her sign him over. She was crying. I was crying. I am still crying. And all of those stories made me really understand in an essential way the connection between facts and personal stories and the people, the need for media to let the people in. You know, I don't remember the personalities, I remember those people. I remember the power of media that lets people in. This was before our national disability insurance scheme had been implemented. And I think we need to remember that policy in a democracy is about people. You know, how are we going to get the change that people talk about at TED without policy and people coming together to make a difference? And I remember the program director, John, he was in his 70s. And he always had such enthusiasm in his eyes after he'd had a conversation with a real person, which I'm not sure how many people in media companies have conversations with real people. And he'd sit down and he'd ask if he'd see someone and he'd ask, can I sit with you? Can I hear what's going on in your lives? Can you tell me what's important to you? And in that I learned about the power that media that adapts to people and the way that it needs to adapt, which is it needs every day, regularly, to be touching in with real people, hearing their stories in order for it to make content that's relevant to you. So that's all fine and well, but even then, 7 years ago, I knew that some media companies weren't going to survive the digital age. You could see it even then. Some of them were closing down, struggling, advertising revenue was shrinking, and the distribution models have just been completely and utterly changed. So I started experimenting with hyperlocal, community-powered news, with local wikis, even with the Ushahidi crowdsourced mapping platform. Some of the things I tried worked and some of them didn't. But all the while, still I saw that intersection between the need for high-quality media for us to have a functioning participatory democracy and the need to somehow, in this rapidly changing age, to let the people in and put you at the centre of everything that we did. Today, I work in digital and innovation at a public broadcaster. And I know for some of you that probably completely disqualifies me from even talking here today. I mean, after all, who am I to stand up here and ask you to help media companies with the problems that they face? But I don't think it's about where I work, and I don't think it's about media companies. I think it's about us. I think it's about what will happen to us if we don't have a functioning democracy. How will you get your issues dealt with? I want at the end of today, or end of this talk, for you to consider putting this problem on your list of top 10 issues that you might act on. I want you to consider how you will get your other issues on your list dealt with if we don't have a functioning democracy. And I want you to know, I want to tell you this confession, which is about now in the speech. I'm supposed to explain to you what citizen-centric media looks like, give you a good visual image, and the truth of the matter is, I haven't got a clue. And that is the nature of what I think citizen-centric media is. It is you who know what it is. It's not me. 37 years of media experience ain't gonna cut it. There's a lot of media executives with a lot more experience than me, a lot smarter, with a lot more information. And all of them are struggling. The answer is in you, in us being prepared to accept that this is not a problem of theirs, this is a problem of ours, to understand our interrelationship with media, how essential it is to all the freedoms that we take for granted. The only thing I can offer you today or share with you is some research that we've already gathered from you, some data. And it shows some things, and some of that, I think, just some thought starters maybe for you to think about. But it shows one thing more than anything, which is how complex it is and how impossible it is going to be for media companies to keep up with the rate of change without your help. Oh, I haven't got a timer, so if I'm over time, someone needs to tell me. So what the research is showing us is that localism is a function that you would like to be able to turn up or down depending on your time of day and your preferences. So maybe some kind of feature that does that for you might be useful. It's also showing us, the research, that some of you love sport, some of you don't like sport. Don't get me started on those people, I don't want to speak to them. But a lot of you would like a feature so you can turn sport on or off. It's showing us that while some of you have really strong preferences for certain types of media, none of you want to miss out on an important story, regardless of its source. It's showing us that, surprisingly, and I'm happy with this for someone who's tried hyperlocal experiments, it's showing us that you don't want local by itself. And that's reassuring. I say that's reassuring because to me that it shows you're not just interested in what's going on in your backyard, you also care just as much about what's happening outside of it. It's also showing us that you're complex, deeply complex. And this is the problem. And what you want is a function of so many things. And this is research from even Launceston, from towns all across Australia. It's showing us that what you want is a function of the town you live in, the size of the town nearest, your age, your use of technology, so many factors. We are never going to be able to keep up with all these data points. So how are we going to adapt and thrive? How are media companies going to be able to meet your needs if you don't see this as your problem as well as our own? So I ask you to do something. I ask you to put this issue in your top 10 issues that you might think about acting on. I want you to consider how you are going to get action on the other issues that matter to you, the environment, health, education, the economy. How you're going to do that without journalists, without a functioning media. Do you expect that Twitter and Facebook is going to meet all your needs, or are you just going to blog about it yourself? So I'd like you to stop, think, to observe yourself in these coming weeks, to write down what you love, what you hate, what you've seen, what you'd really like fixed. And I'd like you to continue doing this for as long as possible. And then to take that information, to tweet it, to blog it, to share it, to pin it, with not just one media company, with as many as possible. And I promise you something. I promise that something will happen. I promise this is not just idealistic rhetoric from a hippie kid. I promise this is interesting, important work that you could be doing to help media companies adapt and thrive, to help them make products that are relevant to you. Citizen Centric Media. I think it's something that could change everything. All that it requires is for you to step into the centre of the circle, to start a conversation, and to stay there.